Technology is a power within the world. We often think that we control the things that we create, but that is not always the case. When we think about the invention of the car, for instance, few people would have realized at the advent of the car at first that it would have such a profound influence upon just about every single way that we live, about the way that we relate together, about the ways that families relate together over large distances nowadays. We would not think about the influence that cars would have upon town planning, about the ways that our lives would be divided up by roads that would have to travel from one place to another by a vehicle. Now, many of the things that you would previously have been able to enjoy without a car are now only available if you have a car. The sort of community that you could enjoy without a car in the past is one that now requires a vehicle. This is an illustration, among many others, of the way in which technologies are principalities or powers operative within the world beyond our power to control. They unleash tendencies and possibilities and potentials within the world that we are not always in control of. In the story of Daniel, we have a good example of the way in which things that human beings have created as means of their power can become powers over them. In Daniel chapter 6, King Darius makes a decree, and according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, the decree cannot be revoked. Now, you might think in that context that this is an example of great power, that you have a decree that cannot be reversed, that cannot be overcome. No one can resist this power that you have unleashed within the world. But yet, in the case of Daniel and Darius, the decree comes back to bite Darius. He finds himself under the power of his own creation. It's the same thing that can happen with our technologies. We can invent things, unleash things in the world, and find that they come back to exercise power over us. Things that we thought would once liberate us, enabling us, for instance, to get closer to things that were at a far distance, now mean that we live at a farther distance from things that we were once close to. We might think about the technologies of the internet. Many of the things that promise to bring us together now bring us into a situation where we're constantly at odds with each other. The promise of the technology is not always delivered upon, and that which we thought we once controlled can end up controlling us. The hubris with which human beings use technology can be seen from the very beginning of Scripture. We might think about the story of the Tower of Babel, where man presumes by his might to create this great tower uniting heaven and earth and uniting all of humanity within this great city. And that act of technological hubris is seen as the seed of something that is expressed at many other points in Scripture, not least in the book of Daniel. This hubris is one that is deep within the heart of man. This belief that we control our technologies, and by these technologies we can assume to a godlike status. We can be like gods bestriding the earth, controlling the things around us. Perhaps the greatest example of a technique or technology that is of this kind is the state, the means by which we can control society. We believe that if we have the right laws, if we have the right systems of government, if we have the right structures of government and military power, whatever it is, we can control human beings. We can control our destiny, we can control the way that society works out. And yet so often we find that our hubris and our promises that are made for the power of the state, the power of human ingenuity, are not ones that are lived up to. Perhaps very thankfully, many of these promises are quite threatening and scary promises. When we look at our technologies then, we need to recognize the power that they can exert over us. We are not always the ones in control. Even if we are the creator, they can come back to bite us. The point of this is not to declare technologies to be bad, certainly not in the abstract, nor is it to bring us to a point where we just dismiss or reject technologies out of hand. Rather, we need to be discerning about technologies. We need to recognize humbly the limits of our power, the tendency of technology to twist our lives in certain ways, to exercise control over us, and to put us in situations where we may actually be less free than we were prior to their advent.